All right, let's get on. Before we begin, there was a question about how we can open doors. Maybe we'll move towards that first. Let's take this fridge as an example. And before we can actually open the door, we need to give it some doors. The way I made it, it was just a big block. So let's go into edit mode by pressing tab. I'll create a loop cut with Control R, and I'll bring it in front here just to give it a cut where I think the door should be. And one more over here to separate the two doors. Now let's try and select the door. Okay, make sure you're in face mode, select the door, deselect the parts you don't want. Get this over here, select this part, so shift click the entire time. So when you're sure you've got all the faces that you need, press the key P and you'll see separate. So separate by selection, meaning that everything you've selected is now a new object. If we go into the furniture here, you'll see fridge and fridge 1, which is the door itself. Let's click the fridge door, press tab, go out of edit mode, go into object, shift select the main fridge, Control P to parent it, just so we can move everything around at the same time. So if we're trying to open the door, there's multiple ways to do it. Let's look at the simplest one. Essentially what you're trying to do is to, let's just select the door, rotate it and get it to open. If you do this, you'll see it's weird. If you remember from the last episode, we said that when you rotate, you sort of rotate around the axis of where the orange dot is. So you can see that line going there. So all we need to do really is to change where that origin is. We will shift select this side of the door where you think the pivot point will be. And whenever you shift select something to move this cursor, it always moves it towards the surface of that object. With the door selected and this cursor on the edge, we will press right click, set origin to 3D cursor. So that yellow dot has moved here. Now if we rotate on the Z axis, you can see this will open. It might be a bit annoying if you always have to press rotate and then Z, because if you don't, you'll rotate everywhere else. So with the door selected, press N to open this up, go to item, and you can lock the X and Y rotation. So now when you rotate, it only rotates on the Z axis. Second annoyance, of course, is that your door can do a little merry-go-round here, which is not realistic. And what we're going to do is we're going to come here, which is object constraints. We're going to add an object constraint and choose limit rotation. We've got the X and Y locked up here, but we can do it here as well. So it's locked. It can only go from 0 to 0, which is essentially nothing. And for this one, you would think the value would be between 0 to 90, right? You want to open it 90 degrees. But if you look here, you can see that this object, this door, is already rotated to 90 degrees. Why is that? Remembering that our world origin is over here. And, I'm sorry, if you hear weird noises, it's because there's some construction going on. So the world origin up, the front and back is here, the left and right is here. And this object is rotated, so it assumes it's already rotated 90 degrees. So what we can do is, you can either ignore that and just work with those numbers, or with the object selected, Control A, we usually apply the scale. This time we'll apply the rotation instead, telling Blender this is the default location for this object. So you can see it's back to 0. When you select this, you can try it out. So you see if you go positive, it opens inwards. If you go towards negative, it opens outwards. So really what we want is from 0 to minus 90, or minus 100, depending on how you want it to open. Let's try that. So minimum minus 100 degrees, maximum 0 degrees. And now, if you try to rotate it, either using this tool over here or just using the R, pressing R to rotate, you'll find that you cannot rotate it further than what you've sort of predetermined. That's great. So now you have a fridge door. You can just repeat the exact same thing for this side, separate the door by selection, set the origin to the side, set a rotation limit and open it up. And there you go. And you can do the same thing with all the doors as well. The nice thing, of course, is that with the layout plan, it shows you whether some doors, like the front door, you have the option of opening it either ways, or like with the bomb shelter, it only rotates outwards. So you put your door there and you put it to 90 degrees, and you can have a door that opens and closes. You might be wondering why my layout is really colorful. So in our usual solid mode, which is what I'm in now, if you come up here and you see this little chevron, you press that, you can choose what you want the shading to be like. Typically it's an object where everything is black and white. But if you put it at random, every time you create a new object, like how this door is a new object now, it gives it a different color. You might find that it's a bit easier to see things that way, or if it's not, you can always just go back to object. So let's see where we've left off. I've made a few extra items, table, speakers. I've even given it cables, that sort of thing, and got a bedroom, toilet, that sort of thing. Without a sink, this is unhygienic. I hope your layout is built up already as well. And let's move on from there, shall we? So the thing that we want to do today is apply materials. We want materials on the floors. We want materials on the walls, textures, that sort of thing. And the way we've set it up currently, we've got modifiers. So, if I try to select this wall, it's selecting the entire wall instead of just the outside surface or the inside surface, which will be problematic when we, if you want to apply wall paintings or textures, that sort of thing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to click the collection with walls in it. That's all the walls. I hope you've been separating it as you've gone along. And we are going to duplicate the collection. So the old one, we will just call it old wall. And the new one, we will call it modified wall. And press the eye icon on the old one, so all you have is the new one. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to start applying all our modifiers. And in case we make a mistake somewhere along the way, we can always reference the old one and bring back things that are too far gone. So let's start applying our modifiers. And the important thing to note is when you apply modifiers, you want to apply it in the same order that it is right here. So you don't want to apply bool tool and then solidify. You want to do it this way because that's how Blender sees it. If you do it the other way around, sometimes things can go wrong. There are a few ways you can apply. If you're an older version of Blender, every time you're in a modifier, usually in the bottom here, you'd have a button that just says apply. You can click that and apply. In Blender 2.9 and above, you can click the chevron key and hit apply, or hover over the modifier and hit Control A. So let's do that in every room. Let's go here, Control A, Control A, Control A. Remember, it has to be in order, so just hover over the top and just press your Control A as fast as you can. Pop, 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 and pop. Okay, I think we've done it. So the difference, of course, is now if I select the wall, each one of the faces is something else that you can select. And when it comes to the doors and windows, if you select this template over here and you try and resize it, you see it's not going to change the size anymore. So, which means we don't need all these anymore, the little outlines of the cutters that I used to call them, the door and window cutter. So let's select all of it, or select as many as you want first. Press M on the keyboard to add it to a new collection. I'll just call them cutters. I just don't like deleting things until the very end, and we'll hide the cutters. So anytime you see one, you just select them. Not the floor. Let's try it again. This, M, cutters. This. Is that everything? Probably. Okay, great. So we've got all the doors and windows in place. We've got all the little walls solidified and with the appropriate thickness. Now comes the part that you're all waiting for. Let's apply textures. Again, there's multiple places that we can get them from. You could, just do a Google search for free textures. The one that I tend to use, though, is this place called, look for Quixel Megascans. If you've ever played a video game, you've probably heard of the Unreal Engine. This is the people who made that, and they have this huge library of 3D objects and textures in incredibly high resolution, and it's all free, with the only caveat being that you sign in using your Epic Games account. So if you don't have one, I think it only is free if you have an Epic Games account. Regardless, registration is free. When you sign in, you basically have access to what's known as the Megascans. So you can see you've got different types. 3D assets are the 3D objects we've been downloading so far. Plants are plants. Surfaces are what we're going to go through. Decals are stickers, and the rest is not very important for now. Only reason I didn't use this for 3D assets before is that theirs tend to focus more on nature. So, there's lots of rocks and debris and snowbanks and all. If you're doing an outdoor scene, this makes it a lot easier. For what we need today, we're looking for surfaces, right? So let's go into surfaces and say, for example, I want let's say a plaster wall. So plaster, surfaces, plaster. And when you come here, you've got different categories. You can check each one. Each one has a multitude of selection, or you can just scroll down and you'll see you've got loads of surfaces here. Let's see, sure, this one. And you'll get this little picture of what the surface looks like. You can zoom in as well. For our purposes, we're just going to go for the lowest resolution because we don't really need one that's super high res. We're not trying to make a movie or anything, which is usually 2K. So before you click download, go to the settings. Let's just go through some of this very quickly. The file settings here, you can just keep it as FBX. It's fine for Blender. Level of detail is how detailed it's going to be. 0 being the most detailed, 8 being the least. To be honest, for our purposes, we can just go with the least and save up on the file size. So just select LOD 8. Texture settings. Different programs uses different data to sort of figure out what the texture is supposed to look like. And for Blender, and for our purposes, we're only going to really need 3 things. So we need the albedo, which is the actual color, the normal, which I'll describe later, and the roughness. So deselect everything else and just make sure you've got roughness, normal, albedo selected. And go back and then hit download. So I'll go back to Blender. I think I've downloaded it earlier. And now we're going to go to what's known as the shading menu. Over in the top here, click shading and you'll come here. This can look very intimidating, so let's clear things a bit. Join this area up. And just so you know, all this different things here is just different layouts. You could do it in the main layout menu itself. We've done it last week where you open it up and we can go to shader editor over here and you get the same thing. But they've already set things up for us, so let's just use them so you know more about how Blender is being run. And every time you select an object, it has materials, it'll show up here. Don't be intimidated by this. It looks like loads of numbers, but you might realize in the same way we applied materials last week, if you come here to material properties, it is the exact same menu, same setting. So if I were to make sure I'm in material preview, change the color here, it'll change here as well, and it'll change up here. Great. Node editor is very powerful, but we will do this in the simplest way possible. To make sure we can do it simply, you want to go to Edit Preferences, and we're going to add a new add-on. It's called a Node Wrangler. So if you search Node and you get Node Wrangler, make sure it's turned on. Exit. Now, this is a powerful add-on. It makes things easier for us. So say, for example, I want to apply the materials to my wall. If all your wall, remember, is sharing the same material, we'll call this wall. When you change one, you change it for everyone because they're sharing the same properties. So go back to your shader editor, left click on this green one, Principal BSDF, and press Control-Shift-T. Control-Shift-T, like you see down here, and locate your downloaded assets. Let's see, where's mine? Megascans. Right, so for the wall, I've selected plaster, right? And we say we need 3 things: albedo, normal, and roughness. So select all 3 and click Principal Texture Setup. Because we've used Node Wrangler, it's done all the hard work for us, so it looks very intimidating, but don't worry, it's done everything. If you look up here, it's applied. You've got plaster on your walls, and it's divided it into sort of the color that goes into base color, roughness that goes here, and the normal. Just to show you what all these means. So remember, albedo is color. So instead of choosing a single color, you're telling it, I want you to take all this, this picture basically, apply it to the whole thing. For the roughness, remember we talked about values between 0 and 1. So roughness of 0 is very, shiny. It's reflective. Roughness of 1 means not reflective at all. And the way this program looks at it, it's just a black and white value. So black is 0, white is 1. Shades of gray is everything in between. So instead of applying the roughness to an entire object, it looks at the picture, see where it's black, where it's white, and then it goes between the values of 0 to 1. This one, it's plaster, it's practically all white, so it's the same as having the roughness as 1. And the normal map is simulating bumps. So this is a 2D object. Imagine you're drawing a 2D picture and you want to show depth, you want to show volume. And the way you do it is to add sort of highlights and shadows in different areas. And it looks three-dimensional even though it's not. So that's what it's doing here. If you want to see that in greater effect, you bring up the strength and look at that. It's quite obvious that you can see bumps everywhere, but it's still actually a flat object. That's a bit ugly. So the key is usually subtlety. Let's bring it up a bit so it looks like plaster. And you've applied plaster to all the walls or, whatever surfaces you've chose. Something else that you probably want to use is here is a scale. We'll leave the scale for now and I'll show it in the next section because it's probably a bit easier to appreciate it there. So plaster applied everywhere. So say for example, you've applied your plaster, but you don't really want it in all the walls. For the kitchen specifically, you want this area where you've got nice tiles and things. Let's do that. So select your kitchen wall, tab to go into edit mode, and say we want it going across here. Control R will add a loop cut here to delineate the area. Control R, another loop cut here and here. We've done this before with the TV. You've added multiple materials to one object. So select here and this. So currently it's using the wall texture. We'll press a plus and assign something new to that, right? So we've assigned it something new. And if I just tab out now, you'll see this place is just white. So let's go back to that and we'll call it kitchen tile. Right, okay. So we'll do the same thing again. Click this, Control Shift T. I've downloaded something for it. I think it's this one, marble. Yeah. So albedo, normal, roughness. Press enter. And you'll see it's applied the tile. Two things to note here. Firstly, you'll notice it's a bit more stretched in the forward axis here and weirdly up and down over here. It's because we're shortcutting a lot of things. We're not doing a UV unwrap, and that's completely fine. We can work around that. So if you ever find yourself in something like this and you think it looks weird, under mapping here, instead of UV, you can select something else. So generated. We'll go to generated, left click, and move it here. That looks really weird. What's going on? Try. If you come here, you'll see that this is under flat. Flat assumes you're on a single plane, right? This has a few more sides than a plane. It's a bit more like a cube. So we'll change this to box. And that looks perfect. If you change this to box, make sure you change everything else to box as well. And look. Now your tiles look proper. Ooh, I can't zoom in on this. Let's reframe. Yeah, there we go. So the tiles look good. And we were going to talk about scaling. So say, for example, you like the way the tiles look, but the scale looks weird. You can change the scale over here. So change it on the x-axis, the y, or the z. Or if you shift and hold your left click and move down, select all three, you can change the scales for all three at once. So let's make this bigger or smaller. Let's make it smaller. And now you've added a section that's just specifically for tiles. This might be a good example. If we look at the roughness value for the tiles, you'll see it's a bit more obvious here. So anything that's white is a value of 1, so it's not shiny at all. Anything that's black is more shiny, gray is somewhere in between. And to illustrate this, let me just quickly add a light source. If I go under rendered. Yeah, so you can see it's actually acting the way you'd expect the tile to. Shiny bits are shiny, not shiny bits are not shiny. So that's the powerful thing with textures. And finally, let's do the floor. Select the floor. Let's give it a new material. Select this, Control Shift T. I've got something downloaded, I think. Floor, yep. I think I got tiles. So everything that I'm using here for the textures is just from that Quixel place. Remember, it's free. You just look for what you want and download it. That is huge. Let's scale that a bit. Yeah, maybe that looks a bit better. If you think you want it to look a bit more indented, remember you can just add some height to the normals. And look, there you go. So you've added plaster to the wall, you've added tiled floors, you've added specific sections to the kitchen. you know, now that you've applied the modifier and each wall is its own thing, you can even sort of go in and say, well, you know, for this room, I want the walls to be yellow. So let's go here, change that, assign a new material, assign it to display specifically, make it yellow. And there you go. This wall is attached to this room, so let's just select that, select this face, assign, and find our yellow material. See, guys, this is why when you stop naming things at some point, it becomes difficult to look for it. Yeah. So you've got a yellow room, and oh, this part's weird. It's fine. Let's tab to edit. Let's go battery slow. You know, add a loop cut over there and change the color. It's fine. I'll leave it like that for now. So I hope you get a general idea. It's not too difficult. You sometimes have to do a bit of finagling to get the results that you want. Let's go back to this. You know, especially if it, just remember, if it looks a bit weird, it's probably because we didn't UV unwrap, and the way to go about that is, if UV doesn't work, try generated or try object. And let's bring the scale up so you can see that. Yeah, see, typically that makes it look quite nice. And if your object is not completely flat, change it to box for everything here, and it should work. If it doesn't, let me know in the comments. I can always try and help. See, for example, get sections like this where it's very stretched. Then you just have to work around it and change the settings, and you'll always find a way, don't worry. And that's about it, I think. So we've looked through how to open a door for your fridge, to limit the constraints, how to use free textures to apply it to everything in your room. And I'll probably stop there. And let's see. So next episode, perhaps we shall go through how to create transparent see-through glass for the windows, how to put in the doors, and since we've done the door opening animation already, that's going to be a bit quicker, and lighting fixtures. That's about it, guys. Thank you.